Along the fog-shrouded coastline of Massachusetts, where Atlantic winds carry whispers of forgotten sins, stands a crumbling stone marker few dare to approach. Local fishermen make the sign of the cross when passing it, and even the boldest historians hesitate to discuss what it commemorates. The marker bears only a date, 1687, and two names that once struck terror into the hearts of every God-fearing colonist, Ezekiel and Judith Harrington. For nearly 2 decades, these siblings built an empire of blood and accusation, growing wealthy from the screams of the innocent and the seizure of their properties. But when their unholy union produced twin children so grotesquely malformed that even the most hardened physicians fled in horror, people whispered that divine justice had finally found them. What really happened in that isolated manor house where 8-year-old children with twisted bodies and brilliant minds plotted against their own parents remained buried beneath layers of fear and superstition until now? The truth about the Harrington fortune and its cursed inheritors reveals a level of calculated evil that would make even the most hardened observer question what humanity is capable of when greed overrides conscience. The Massachusetts Bay Colony of the 1660s existed in a state of constant religious fervor and economic struggle. Small coastal communities like Wickham's Harbor, a settlement of barely 300 souls nestled between rocky cliffs and pine forests, survived on fishing, farming, and an uneasy relationship with the supernatural beliefs that governed every aspect of colonial life. Puritan doctrine demanded constant vigilance against Satan's influence, and in such isolated communities, suspicion could spread faster than wildfire. Ezekiel Harrington, at 28 years old, possessed sharp features and piercing gray eyes that would later become synonymous with accusation and judgment. His younger sister, Judith, 25, and equally striking in her austere beauty, shared the same angular jaw and cold demeanor. But where Ezekiel commanded attention through presence, Judith wielded influence through whispered words and carefully planted doubts. Both siblings had received an education unusual for their station. Their father, a failed merchant from Boston, had insisted on teaching them to read, write, and, most importantly, to understand the legal intricacies of property ownership and inheritance law. When their parents died of fever in 1663, leaving the siblings with little more than a modest farmhouse and mounting debts, they faced the same bleak prospects as countless other young colonists. But unlike their neighbors, who turned to honest labor or trade, the Harrington siblings saw opportunity in the growing hysteria surrounding witchcraft. Communities throughout New England had begun employing witch-finders, individuals who claimed special knowledge in identifying servants of Satan. These professionals could command substantial fees for their services and, more lucratively, often received portions of the condemned's confiscated property. The siblings' first client was the village of Milford, a 2-day ride inland, where crop failures and stillborn livestock had created an atmosphere ripe for supernatural explanations. Ezekiel presented himself as a learned man who had studied the signs of witchcraft, while Judith posed as his assistant, skilled in detecting hidden marks upon the accused. Their method was brutally simple. They would arrive in a troubled community, study the local dynamics of wealth and power, then systematically accuse those whose properties would prove most profitable once confiscated. The widow Constance Fletcher became their first victim, a woman whose late husband had left her a valuable grain mill coveted by several local men. Under the Harrington siblings' careful orchestration, Constance found herself accused of blighting the harvest through unholy communion with dark forces. The evidence they presented seemed overwhelming: mysterious marks upon her body, secretly inflicted during a forced examination, testimony from neighbors claiming to have seen her muttering strange words, coached by Judith's careful suggestions, and the damning fact that her mill continued to produce flour when others failed, actually the result of her superior maintenance and location. Constance Fletcher was hanged on November 15, 1664, and her mill was divided between the town and the Harrington siblings as payment for their services. This was merely the beginning of an enterprise that would eventually span 8 communities and claim the lives of 57 innocent people over 15 years. The decision for Ezekiel and Judith to marry came not from romantic inclination. Such unions between siblings were technically possible under colonial law when justified by compelling circumstances, but from cold, practical calculation. By 1675, the siblings controlled assets worth over $40,000, an enormous fortune by colonial standards. They owned property in 9 communities, held mortgages on dozens of farms and businesses, and possessed detailed records of their criminal activities spanning more than a decade. The problem they faced was one of inheritance and security. If either sibling married outside the family, their spouse would gain legal rights to a portion of their wealth, and, more dangerously, potential access to the carefully guarded secrets that had made their fortune possible. Similarly, if either sibling died without direct heirs, complex inheritance laws might result in their assets being distributed among distant relatives or claimed by the colonial government. Their solution demonstrated the same ruthless pragmatism that characterized their entire careers. Ezekiel, as the elder sibling, would marry Judith in a private ceremony performed by a corrupt minister they had compromised during a witch trial in Salem Village. The union would be kept secret from the wider community, presented instead as a business partnership between a confirmed bachelor and spinster who had dedicated their lives to serving God through the identification and elimination of supernatural threats. The secret wedding took place on December 21, 1675, during the winter solstice, a date chosen for its symbolic significance rather than any supernatural beliefs. The ceremony was held in the basement of their manor, witnessed only by the corrupt minister and 2 servants threatened into silence. The wedding was a mockery of Christian tradition, performed not in celebration of love or spiritual union, but as a legal maneuver to protect their accumulated wealth and shared secrets. The pregnancy that began in early 1676 seemed to validate the siblings' confidence in their unholy arrangement. Judith's condition progressed normally through the first several months with no signs of complications. The siblings hired a skilled midwife from Boston, paying her a hefty fee to relocate temporarily to their manor and provide the best possible care. They ordered special foods, imported medicines, and commissioned matching cradles crafted from the finest mahogany, fitted with silk bedding suitable for children destined to inherit great wealth. But as Judith's pregnancy advanced into its final trimester, subtle signs emerged that something was terribly wrong. The first indication came during the 7th month, when Judith began experiencing movements the midwife described as unusual in their violence and coordination. Sarah Witham, the experienced midwife who had delivered over 300 babies, had never felt fetal movements quite like those in Judith's womb. Rather than typical kicks and turns, these movements seemed to involve multiple entities engaged in what could only be described as combat. "It's as though they're fighting each other," Sarah confided to her assistant, Emma Prescott, who had come from Boston to help with what was expected to be a routine, if secretive, delivery. "I've delivered twins many times, but never have I felt such aggressive motion." Ezekiel dismissed these concerns as superstitious imaginings, but privately he began to worry. The siblings had invested too much in this pregnancy to accept that anything might go wrong. Ezekiel threw himself into research, purchasing every medical text available in the colonies, corresponding with physicians in London and Edinburgh, and consulting midwives from other regions about difficult births and abnormal developments. What he discovered was both reassuring and disturbing. Multiple texts confirmed that twin pregnancies often involved more violent fetal movements, particularly when children competed for space and resources. But several sources also mentioned increased risks associated with close kinship between parents, including higher rates of stillbirth, physical abnormalities, and mental deficiencies in surviving offspring. The birth, when it began on March 15, 1677, lasted nearly 2 days and involved complications that haunted Sarah Witham for the rest of her life. The twins that emerged were immediately recognizable as severely malformed, with limbs branching at impossible angles, skulls with additional bony protrusions, and bodies connected by tissue bridges that linked their torsos and possibly internal organs. What shocked the attending women was the realization that these children possessed an awareness and coordination far beyond their developmental stage. They moved with purpose, grasped objects placed near them, and seemed to communicate through sounds and gestures neither midwife could interpret. Despite their severe physical abnormalities, the twins demonstrated intelligence that was both remarkable and unsettling. The children, whom Ezekiel and Judith named Gabriel and Raphael, choosing biblical names to deflect supernatural interpretations, survived their difficult birth and began to grow in ways that defied expectations about children born with such deformities. By their first birthday, it was clear their intelligence far exceeded normal developmental milestones, even as their physical limitations became more pronounced. The years between 1677 and 1685 marked the height of the Harrington siblings' power and the beginning of their greatest challenge. As Gabriel and Raphael grew from infants into children, their unique combination of severe physical deformities and extraordinary intelligence created problems beyond simple medical care. The boys, despite their unusual shared anatomy, required constant supervision and specialized attention that made maintaining the siblings' public careers increasingly difficult. By their 8th birthday in March 1685, the twins had developed into something unprecedented in colonial Massachusetts: severely disabled children with intellectual capabilities rivaling educated adults. Despite their inability to walk normally or engage in typical childhood activities, Gabriel and Raphael taught themselves to read by age 4, mastered basic mathematics by 5, and by their 7th year were engaging in philosophical discussions that would have challenged university students. But most disturbing was their growing awareness of their parents' true nature and activities. The twins had been kept isolated within the manor their entire lives, officially to protect them from cruel stares and supernatural fears, but actually to prevent anyone from connecting their condition to divine judgment on their parents' crimes. This isolation gave them unprecedented access to their parents' private conversations, business records, and planning sessions. Gabriel and Raphael developed an uncanny ability to remain silent and motionless when adults entered, leading Ezekiel and Judith to discuss sensitive matters freely, assuming the children were too young or disabled to understand. This assumption proved a catastrophic mistake that would lead to the siblings' destruction. By 1685, the twins possessed detailed knowledge of their parents' hunting operations, including manufactured evidence, bribed witnesses, and the systematic murder of innocent people for financial gain. More significantly, they understood their physical condition was not divine judgment or random misfortune, but the direct result of their parents' incestuous marriage to protect their criminal empire. This filled them with rage, grief, and determination remarkable in its intensity and sophistication. Despite their physical limitations and dependence on their parents, Gabriel and Raphael began planning to expose the truth about the Harrington criminal enterprise and secure justice for their parents' victims. Their first opportunity came in the summer of 1685 when Margaret Caldwell, a young woman seeking employment as a servant, arrived at the manor. Margaret was the daughter of Thomas Caldwell, a blacksmith executed for witchcraft in 1679, after the siblings orchestrated his accusation to acquire his valuable forge and prime real estate in Hadley's Crossing. Unaware of the Harringtons' role in her father's death, Margaret saw them as wealthy, respected community members who might provide work for a woman left destitute by family tragedy. What she discovered during her residence would lead to the most significant witch trial scandal in colonial American history. The twins' strategy for communicating with Margaret was ingenious and heartbreaking. Despite severe speech impediments and physical limitations, they developed ways of leaving written messages where she would find them during cleaning duties. These messages began with basic information about hidden documents and suspicious financial records, but grew to include detailed instructions about evidence locations. The twins also learned to distinguish their parents' visitors, warning Margaret when dangerous individuals were scheduled to arrive. They observed enough of their parents' operations to know some associates were even more violent than Ezekiel and Judith, using their knowledge to help Margaret avoid fatal encounters. The turning point came in September 1685 when the twins provided Margaret with information about a hidden compartment behind a false wall in Ezekiel's study, containing financial ledgers documenting 15 years of criminal activity. These ledgers detailed payments for witch trials, itemized confiscated properties, their estimated values, and notations about preparation costs and witness fees, revealing the systematic nature of their operations. Margaret's discovery provided irrefutable proof of the Harringtons' murders for profit, but placed her in mortal danger. She knew that if Ezekiel and Judith discovered her knowledge, they would eliminate her using their perfected methods. Her solution demonstrated courage and strategic thinking. Rather than fleeing or confronting the siblings, Margaret secretly copied the most damning documents while contacting Father Benedict Thorne, a Jesuit priest recently arrived from France with theological knowledge and political connections to investigate powerful colonial figures. Father Thorne's investigation began with skepticism, but evolved into horror as he uncovered layers of systematic evil. Margaret's cautious approach, sharing copies of ledgers, witness lists with payment notations, and maps of confiscated properties, painted a picture of a criminal enterprise exceeding his worst expectations. Father Thorne's expertise in theology and natural philosophy made him uniquely qualified to understand the case's implications. Unlike colonial authorities who might dismiss supernatural accusations or medical professionals focused on the children's condition, he could investigate both criminal and moral dimensions. His visit to the manor in October 1685, presented as a routine pastoral call, was a strategic move to assess Gabriel and Raphael's ability to serve as witnesses. The siblings, confident in manipulating religious authorities, welcomed him to legitimize their standing while gathering intelligence. Within minutes of entering, Father Thorne detected atmospheric disturbances suggesting profound spiritual corruption, not supernatural, but the psychological residue of decades of calculated murder. His request to meet the children, ostensibly for pastoral concern, aimed to evaluate their awareness. Margaret's reports suggested they understood more than their parents realized, but he needed first-hand confirmation. When he entered their chambers, he found Gabriel and Raphael's intellectual sophistication and emotional maturity remarkable for any age, particularly for isolated children. They showed no fear, only relief and hope, as if waiting for someone with authority to challenge their parents. They immediately attempted to communicate witnessed crimes and hidden evidence. Father Thorne's departure was cordial, but all parties knew a confrontation had begun. His investigation, using the Catholic Church's sophisticated methods, assembled a dossier within 3 weeks, including subpoenaed financial records, victim relatives' testimonies, and a confession from Marcus Fletcher, a former accomplice who detailed the siblings' methods. Fletcher revealed their incestuous marriage and plans to exploit their children's condition for profit through private exhibitions, adding horror to an already overwhelming case. The twins proved Father Thorne's most powerful weapon. Despite their youth and limitations, their detailed memories corroborated evidence, and their intelligence made them compelling witnesses. Secret interviews revealed systematic abuse, painful medical procedures without anesthesia, intellectual tasks under threat, and documentation for European physicians interested in consanguinity's effects. By December 1685, tension escalated at the manor as Ezekiel discovered evidence of accessed financial records, scratch marks, displaced dust, and marked pages suggesting systematic study. Suspecting Margaret, the siblings interrogated her brutally but realized she couldn't account for all breaches. Their blindness to their children's capabilities proved fatal. Gabriel and Raphael, using coded communication and household object manipulation, continued gathering intelligence, uncovering plans to expand operations and eliminate them as witnesses. The twins accelerated their efforts, planning a final confrontation on December 21, 1685, the 10th anniversary of their parents' secret wedding. Using their intimate knowledge of their parents' habits, they arranged for Father Thorne's arrival during the siblings' private ritual, where they reviewed wealth, victim lists, and future plans. The twins had weakened the manor's structure using fashion tools and architectural knowledge, creating hidden evidence caches and planning a collapse to trap their parents while protecting rescuers. Father Thorne arrived with colonial officials, physicians, legal clerks, and an engineer, prepared for a rescue operation disguised as a pastoral visit. When he requested to see the children, Ezekiel and Judith reluctantly agreed, sensing his assured manner and specific questions. In the twins' room, Gabriel and Raphael recited detailed accounts of crimes, including dates, victim names, and evidence locations, their voices carrying undeniable authority. They revealed hidden caches, bribery networks, and concealed victims, overwhelming Ezekiel and Judith. The siblings attempted to discredit the twins' testimony, claiming delusions, but Father Thorne produced corroborating documents and witness testimonies. Realizing denial was futile, Ezekiel and Judith activated their emergency plan, hidden weapons, and escape routes. But the twins had sabotaged Ezekiel's pistol and rigged floor traps, incapacitating both parents. The manor's central structure collapsed as planned, pinning Ezekiel and Judith while protecting the twins, Father Thorne, and officials. The collapse exposed hidden rooms, stolen property, and undocumented victims, ending the siblings' empire. Ezekiel and Judith died beneath the rubble, their faces showing shock at their children's betrayal. Gabriel and Raphael, injured but alive, continued providing testimony. The aftermath sent shockwaves through Massachusetts, leading to posthumous convictions on 57 murder counts and triggering legal reforms. The financial empire was dismantled, properties restored to victims' families, and the twins' resilience challenged assumptions about disability. Under Dr. William Harvey's care, Gabriel and Raphael thrived, their intellectual and artistic talents flourishing. Gabriel became a legal scholar, influencing judicial protections, while Raphael, a physician, established a school for children with disabilities. Both married, raised healthy families, and broke the cycle of suffering. The manor's ruins became a memorial, its marker inscribed with the twins' words, "Here lies evidence that evil is not supernatural. It is a human choice made by those who value comfort over conscience. Justice depends on the courage of those who refuse to remain silent." The Harrington case reshaped colonial justice, child protection, and disability rights, proving that resilience and moral agency can overcome even the darkest circumstances. The twins' triumph demonstrated that human dignity cannot be destroyed by abuse, and society must support all individuals' potential.